Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone, and welcome to the 16th episode of The Rolling Stone, where I give my initial thoughts and impressions about stories that are currently making the rounds in the news cycle. And our first story for this week and this episode takes us to the great state of Georgia, where we have found out that Jussie Smollett actually has a sister. We didn't know about it at first because they have different last names. So Erika Thomas, she is a black female member of Georgia's House of Representatives, and this week she posted a video to her social media accounts where she was just in tears. And she was in tears because she said that while she had been in a Publix, which is a grocery store chain down in Georgia, she had been viciously and racially attacked. So her story goes like this. She had been in one of the express checkout lanes, but she actually had more items than were allowed in the express lanes, but she had still gone to the express lane because she's reaching the end of her pregnancy and she can't stand for long periods of time. Okay, I'll buy that, I'll accept that. But then she said that while she was in the express lane, a white man, and she was very specific about that, a white man came up to her very aggressively and just started verbally abusing her, being vulgar, and then saying, "Go back to your own country." And of course, the left had a field day with that story because, of course, this was coming right on the tail end of Trump tweeting out, progressive Democrat congresswomen who don't like America, maybe they should go back to, their own countries, or they should go back to, where they came from, fix their countries, and then come back and show us how it's done if things in the U.S. are actually as terrible as they say they are. And of course, go back where you came from, go back to your own country, etc., was said by the left to be completely 100% totally racist. And so, of course, this story that Erika Thomas told was seen as proof that because Trump had given his stamp of approval of open racism and white supremacy, that it was starting to trickle down to everyone else. Well, after she made her initial story, some problems, some holes started to appear in it because the man actually in question, this white man who she said had racially abused her, actually stepped forward. His name is Eric Sparks. And the problem with Erika Thomas's narrative is that Sparks isn't white. He's actually Cuban. He's a Cuban American. Not only that, but he is actually a dyed-in-the-wool ideologue. He has defended the squad on his Twitter account. He has actually gone on Twitter and tweeted out that Donald Trump needs to go back where he came from, in Germany, so that he can find his fascist roots again, okay? So this guy, he is not a Trump-supporting, MAGA hat-wearing guy by any stretch of the imagination, okay? He is definitely firmly on the side of the progressive left. He's a cheerleader for Ilhan Omar and AOC, okay? That'll give you some idea of where he stands. Okay? And so he came forward and he said, I never told her to go back to her own country. He has admitted, up front, that he called her a selfish little bee. Okay? He has fully admitted to that. But he said, I never told her to go back to her own country. He never used racist language like that. So if that was the whole story, okay, I'm going to pause the story right there just for a second and say this, that if this was the whole story, that would be bad enough because it shows that the left is actually attempting to create a pigmentocracy in the U.S. Pigmentocracy, that was actually the societal system of the New World Spanish Empire when they were over here in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. And it was based on your skin color. Your skin color and your blood, that determined your position in society, okay? And this is the exact same thing that the left is trying to recreate in 21st century America, because Erika Thomas and her defenders, when Sparks came forward and said, I'm not a white man, I'm Hispanic, I'm Cuban, they were actually debating him about that, telling him, no, you are not Hispanic, you aren't Cuban, you don't look Cuban, you don't look Hispanic, you're white. You're a white man. You're just trying to, get out from under this accusation of racism. And so here we are, okay? Race, on the one hand, is a social construct, which means that anyone can be any race that they want, but at the same time, if you don't look black, if you don't look Hispanic, if you don't look Cuban, you automatically are not going to be considered to be black or Hispanic, even if that is your ethnic heritage, okay? If you look white, you are automatically now a villain and an oppressor. And because Sparks looked white and Erika Thomas looked black, obviously her narrative made it seem as if she was the victim and he was the oppressor, even when it came forward that, he never said anything racial towards her. That would be bad enough, okay? But it actually gets worse than that, because according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, okay, a newspaper, quote, a witness to a heated grocery store encounter between State Rep Erika Thomas and a man she accused of uttering racist comments told authorities she didn't hear him make those remarks, according to a Cobb County police report. A Publix employee told a Cobb County officer that she witnessed part of the conversation and heard Thomas, quote, continuously tell Eric Sparks to go back where you came from, but did not hear Sparks utter those words to Thomas. So, this story was completely flipped on its head in order to advance a narrative. Once again, Eric Sparks did nothing wrong, said nothing wrong, okay? Except at the end where he lost his cool by his own admittance and called her a selfish little bee. But that had been after, she had told him to go back to his own country, and she was actually advancing upon him. The story goes on to say that according to witnesses and according to video footage in the store, it appears that when she starts actually confronting Sparks, when Thomas starts confronting Sparks, he's trying to de-escalate the situation. He's trying to back down. He's trying to basically get out of the situation, but she keeps advancing. And that's when he called her a selfish little bee and stormed out of the store. Okay? So, what this means is that not only do we have a public leader, okay, a person in public office, Thomas, engaged in outright racism by the rules of the left itself, but we also have another example of a public servant, right? Public officials are public servants. A public servant acting like a public master, okay? Because Erika Thomas apparently believed that because she is a state rep, she is a woman, and she is black, that she was entitled to act in this way to just some innocent civilian bystander with apparently no provocation at all on his end. She felt justified in her office and in her intersectionality to actually attack an innocent man, okay? And I can't help but think, Abraham Lincoln said, if you want to test someone's character, give them power. And apparently, from this story, Erika Thomas has failed that test, both in being a public servant, the power given to her by being a member of Georgia's state House of Representatives, as well as the power given to her by intersectionality. Our second story for this week takes us from the sunny climate of Georgia to the frozen wastelands of, Michigan, okay? So maybe not quite frozen and not really a wasteland. But I'm sure by now that a lot of you have heard about the mishiva surrounding Kathy Zhu, who you can find on Twitter and Instagram under the handle @politicalkathy. So, Kathy Zhu, she's a 20-year-old college student at the University of Michigan. She is a political commentator, really started to come to the public's notice when she was campaigning for Donald Trump in 2016, okay? And she has also been a contestant in the Miss World America beauty pageant, okay? She was crowned Miss Michigan, actually, by the Miss World America organization. But this week, she was actually stripped of her crown and her title entirely by the MWA. And the reason why is because the MWA got word that she has tweeted out what they termed offensive and insensitive material, okay? So what were some of these insensitive, offensive things that Kathy Zhu tweeted out? Well, the first tweet that the MWA cited had to do with a try a hijab booth at the University of Florida. Zhu originally went to college at the University of Florida, and then she transferred to U of Michigan, okay? So the University of Florida, they have this try a hijab booth. And in reaction to that, Kathy Zhu tweeted out, quote, "So you're telling me that it's now just a fashion accessory and not a religious thing? Or are you just trying to get women used to being oppressed under Islam?" unquote. And the second quote that the MWA cited had to do when, in the broader context, which the MWA very conveniently left out, Zhu had been in an argument on Twitter about police violence against Black Americans and against Black communities. And in the process of that argument, Zhu mentioned the Black on Black crime statistic, and she tweeted out this quote, "Did you know the majority of Black deaths are caused by other Blacks? Fix problems within your own community first before blaming others," unquote. Okay, so because of those two tweets, try a hijab and the Black on Black crime statistic, which really anyone can find if they do enough searches on the internet, if they look hard enough, she was completely erased from the Miss World America beauty pageant. Returned her crown, returned her sash, and her title as Miss Michigan has been completely and unequivocally revoked. Now, my initial thoughts about this, okay, I am very confused because this apparently is now the terrain that we inhabit in 21st century postmodern America. We have been told that it is cultural appropriation. If you're white, it is cultural appropriation to wear a sombrero for Cinco de Mayo or for a Halloween costume. We have been told that it is cultural appropriation if you wear dreadlocks, but you're not Black. So logically, okay, according to just my limited way of thinking, I would say that if you're not a Muslim woman and you put on a hijab, that would not only be religiously insensitive, and probably they would say racially insensitive too, but also cultural appropriation, because I'm taking something from one culture that I am not a part of at all, and I am putting it onto myself, okay? By that logic, okay, by their own logic, I would say that trying on a hijab by when I'm not even a Muslim or even a woman would be considered cultural appropriation. But apparently it's not. Not trying on the hijab is now Islamophobia, according to the Miss World America organization. That tweet was actually condemned as Islamophobia. Okay? It is also apparent now that it is racist to point out the high crime statistic in the black community. You know, the black on black crime statistic, which is a statistic, okay, which, you know, is a reflection of reality. It's a sign of reality. And that reality is pain and suffering for the black community, okay? If any community is ravaged by crime, whether it's committed by people within your community or outside of your community, that's pain and suffering, okay? So the black on black crime statistic means that there's a lot of pain and suffering going on in the black American community. Apparently, however, drawing people's attention towards that pain and suffering so that we can actually sit down and try and figure out how to stop that pain and suffering, that's racist. Not being racist, being an ally of black Americans is actually, you know, that is actually the woke thing to do. Just closing your eyes completely to the problem, not mentioning it, that is actually good behavior, okay? That is the sort of upside down world that we live in, where it's not cultural appropriation to wear hijab, but it is cultural appropriation to wear a hijab, which really, when we get right down to it, means that you don't own your own culture. You don't own your religion. You don't own your ethnicity or anything. The people who really own it are the elites, because they will say when someone outside of your group, but wearing your clothes, eating your food, you know, imitating your styles, they will say when that is cultural appropriation or not, because apparently it's only cultural appropriation in some specific circumstances. So the bottom line of that message is that you don't own anything, okay? You may think that they're protecting your religion, your styles, your community, but really what they're saying with this story is that they own everything, and they will decide when it's cultural appropriation and when it's not. And when it's not cultural appropriation, hey, you know what? The white girl from Norway, she can totally try on a hijab, and you can't say anything about it, because otherwise that's Islamophobia. So there's all of that, the very weird terrain that we are on in 21st century postmodern America. But this story also shows very, very well that the culture is completely in the hands of the ideologues. Okay? Because no disrespect to Kathy Zhu, and no disrespect to anybody in the Miss World America organization, no disrespect to any girls, any women, anyone who has participated in any sort of beauty pageants at all. But beauty pageants, they're kind of like cotton candy, right? They're supposed to be fun but mindless, and something that, you know, we forget about 3-4 days after we watch them, right? They don't have a lot of weight to them. They're just supposed to be fun. When political correctness of this level is even in supposedly just fun, brainless, you know, events and organizations like a beauty pageant, that means that the ideology of the left has firmly entrenched itself in our society, and we're all breathing it in. There is no escape from it, because it is everywhere. And the only thing that we can do now is either hunker down, keep our heads down, and, you know, hope that they don't notice us, or we can fight. But that's what this story also tells me. Not just that the progressives and the left and the ideologues have basically appointed themselves the guardians of every religion, every culture, every community, and they will decide what is a cultural appropriation and what is not according to their own narrative and their own goals. But it also says that they have won for the time being. The culture is theirs, and it is now, and if you don't like that, it is now your job and my job to actually take the culture back. And our final story for this episode takes us from Michigan to San Diego, California, specifically San Diego's Comic-Con, where Marvel Studios revealed its lineup for its Phase 4. Now that Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home have been released and wrapped up, this ends the Phase 3 part of Marvel's universe, and it will start Phase 4. And so at the San Diego Comic-Con, they were releasing all the movies and TV show titles that are going to be part of Phase 4. And one of the movies released, whose title was actually released, was another Thor movie. It was entitled Thor, Love and Thunder. And what set woke hearts twittering was the fact that Thor is not going to be played by Chris Hemsworth. Instead, Natalie Portman, who played Jane Foster, Thor's love interest in the first two movies, is actually going to play the God of Thunder. Now, when I say that woke hearts were twittering, I mean that. The woke rejoiced at this news. Brad Nash over at GQ said that this was the boldest move that Marvel had undertaken since Black Panther, because Thor, more than any other character, was symbolic of the fact that the MCU was overrun by quote-unquote white dudes. Okay? But the funny thing about this story is that even though they got what they wanted, feminists were still complaining, okay? And they were complaining about other people's reaction to this news, or complaining just because of how they were wording, what Marvel was doing. So, for example, Philip Ellis on Twitter said, Mjolnir was actually destroyed so Jane can't become Thor. Mate, there is a talking raccoon, and this is the multiverse. Just admit you hate women. So pointing out plot holes now is misogynistic. Brianna Wu also on Twitter said, I swear, these fake comic book boys pretending to know Marvel to get attention. Natalie Portman is playing Thor. Not she-Thor, not female Thor, not Thor woman. She is playing Thor. So even when you try to distinguish new Thor, Natalie Portman, against old Thor, Chris Hemsworth, you're misogynistic, because calling her, woman Thor, female Thor, etc., that is just a sign that you hate women too and are unaccepting of the fact that Marvel is actually going to go with a female Thor. Okay? Ridiculous. Now, I, of course, have some problems here. First of all, to be perfectly fair and honest, this is actually something that happened in the comics too. Okay, Jane Foster did become Thor. It was stupid in the comics, and it's stupid here in the movies. But first and foremost, I would say that this is very much a clear case of religious insensitivity and cultural appropriation, because even though the Thor in the comics and in the movies isn't the Thor from Norse mythology, the Thor from the MCU in the comics is based off of the old original Thor from Norse myths. And there are people in the world today who still worship Thor, along with Odin and Balder and all the other Norse gods. People who follow that old religion. The old religion is called Asatro. Okay, Asatroians, people who follow that religion. They're a very small, minute group. I think the largest group in Europe has between 600 to 800 people in it. So, very small group, no political clout whatsoever, and yet their gods and their beliefs can be culturally appropriated so that Marvel can line its pockets even more with another movie, okay? By the left's own logic, that's what this amounts to. So that's point number one. But point number two is that other people have pointed this out, so I'm not saying anything really original here yet. But this really demonstrates that Hollywood has no original ideas. They're bankrupt for ideas. Instead of taking the time to actually sit down and create original characters and put them in a good, well-plotted movie, like Hollywood is supposed to do, right? And which Hollywood would do if it was actually interested in art and not just money, they're saying that that is too much work. Okay, they're not doing that. All they're doing is that they're taking these established characters and they're switching their genders, or they're trading skin colors, calling it that's good, saying that's good, change maybe a few other small details around them, package it, parcel it, put it out for distribution, watch the money come rolling in. And this is where I have to say that this is hugely insulting. This should be hugely insulting for women and for anyone who belongs to a minority. Because if Hollywood was really interested in representation and diversity, they would take the time in their schedules. They would justify the huge paychecks that they write to themselves, and then they would get up from their recliners, where they're lounging by some private pool or on a private beach, and they would actually clock into the office, and they would create an original character who's a woman, or who's black, or who's gay, or who's Native American, or who is whatever. Choose whatever minority or list of minorities that you want this character to fill, and then they would go a step further and actually put that original character in a good, well-plotted movie surrounded by other interesting supporting and side characters. And then they would market the hell out of it so that it could actually turn a profit when it was released. If Hollywood really cared about representation and diversity, that's what they would do, okay? They would actually put in the work so that women and people of minorities could actually see, someone who is like them, quote unquote, in a good movie, an original character who is quote unquote like them in a good movie. But Hollywood doesn't do that. Instead, Hollywood takes these well-established characters, okay, whether it's Thor here or whether it's James Bond, where we just learned that 007 is now going to be black, and a woman in Bond 25. They take these well-established characters that already have clout, that already have brand value, that already have fans, and all they do is they change their skin color or their skin tone, they change their sex or their gender, change their orientation, something like that, and then they say, that's it, we're done, we're edgy, we're cool, we're hip, and plus we're woke. Now come and see our movie, okay? It's lazy, and it shows that they really don't care about diversity or representation. All they care about is profit and money. And I understand Hollywood is a business like anything else. And so you have to make money in order to pay your people and so that you can keep making the product that you want to make and that, people expect you to make. I get that. But money has become the end all and be all. Because now, instead of actually investing, taking risks with original characters, original stories, all Hollywood does is rehash the same thing over and over and over again, whether that's a franchise, whether that is an idea, whether it's a remake, whatever. And then they just change some of the accidentals about it and call that good. Basically, they're telling women and people of color or other minorities that you get the table scraps. Okay, you're not worth our time or the risk to actually have original characters and an original movie for you. Okay? We're just going to do what we're comfortable with and which we think, our analysts have shown will bring in the money. Hugely disrespectful to women and to minority people as well. But anyway, I think that I have talked long enough. So as usual, guys, happy Friday, have a great weekend, and I will talk to you all on Tuesday. Ciao.